welcome once again into today's discussion about resilience. Welcome to the Open Journal, the public ledger, your blockchain of resilience. This is Ming, your number one host in your heart, 820 on the dial. Today's topic is called the sound of thou. The sound of thou. Almost like a pre-teaser to this episode, when I say the word thou, thou is you. And just as a quick summary before we get into the context of discussion today, I haven't gotten to the repetitive, constant habit of using that term thou. So I know even saying it now, as you hearing it from me today, that word thou, that's something you would hear in church or someone reciting something from the Bible or the Torah. You say, no one uses that term today. That's, medieval. So it's back in the day. No one uses that term. But I'm telling you, opening up my journey towards resilience, it is related in this capacity. Meaning, when I have tried to implement that term in a daily conversation, I know it comes across as quite different and maybe even weird, but I'm telling you, for me, using that term, even as infrequently as I have done it, it brings a different tenor to it, a different bass sound to it, a different resonance for me, a different current or currency that absolutely I can feel the difference in using that term. Even if I'm not talking to anybody directly, using that term and voicing that word, it has a significant physical, almost like DNA level effect on me. Again, I can't explain it physically or in a physics term, but I'm just sharing with you in kind of like an introduction to this discussion today, the sound of thou. If you would allow me a few moments, I'm reading a bit from the book from Mr. Martin Buber. The book is called I and Thou. Well, let me read this to you. It says, for example, the book itself is called I and Thou, and really not to give you the to corrupt or to give you the end of the game, which you'll get from reading this book. But he's really talking about not the I or the thou. The thou is very important in the context of the book, but also it's about the between the I and the thou. I know I'm getting into a very esoterical, ethereal discussion, which is not unusual for me, but I hope you can stick with me on this one. This is from the book I and Thou by Mr. Martin Buber. There's one excerpt here. Quote, how much of a person a man is depends on how strong the I of the basic word I, you is in the human duality of his I. The way he says I, what he means when he says I, decides where a man belongs and where he goes. Listen to it. How dissonant the I of the ego sounds when it issues from tragic lips, tense with some self-contradiction that they try to hold back. It can move us to great pity. It can unconsciously represent contradiction, and it can make us shudder. When the lips are vain and smooth, it sounds embarrassing or disgusting. Those who pronounce the severed I, wallowing in the capital letter, uncover the shame of the world's spirit has been debased to mere spirituality. Let me continue this, another section here. For whoever pronounces the word God and really means you, addresses, no matter what his delusion, the true you of his life that cannot be restricted by any other, and to whom he stands in relationship that includes all others. But whoever abhors the name and fancies that he is godless, when he addresses with his whole devoted being the you of his life that cannot be restricted by any other, he addresses God. Now, let me stop there with reading from Mr. Buber's book. And I'm trying to point out in this discussion about the sound of thou and what it has meant to me. And this is just a really small snippet of what Mr. Buber took a long time to connect these words, I and thou, but then more importantly, identify and explain to the reader what's between the I and thou. If you've had a chance to review other 820 episodes, I've mentioned to you that commonness we have more together than we have in terms of differences. So that commonness is related to what I'm assuming and understanding what Mr. Buber is saying about the between. In that commonness, I'm citing to you in my statements about resilience. It is that love, not that thing out there, that love constant, that actual physical pulse of blood and from the essence of all of us at the heart level. That is where that love is coursing through, from, and to, back and forth throughout your whole body, that I have the same, aspect of this body that you do. That's where we are so much alike and in common, and not on the outer margins of things that distract or deter us from relating to that common essence. So I will continue this discussion on the sound of thou. But I wanted to at least introduce that to you, and also as a preview of another episode called The Ninth Letter. That's coming up also. But let me continue this discussion about this between thing that Mr. Buber assiduously outlined in his book and made it clear for us to take note of, consider, reread it. But definitely it's worth that time that you may have to consider not just the use of this word that seems so biblical and churchy, but just stick with me on the next part of this discussion about the sound of thou. Until then, stay present, stay current. No matter where you are in this world, it is still 820.